Hi, Andrew. We are so excited to have you here on Legit KidLit. Could you please give us a quick intro to you and your book?
Hi, it's so great to be here today with Legit KidLit. Thanks for having me. As you said, my name is Andrew Auseon, and I am the author of Spellbinders, the Not So Chosen One. And this is the first book in a new series, Spellbinders. And it's about a gamer and writer named Ben. He's in the 7th grade, and he sees the world through the lens of his favorite tabletop games and video games and his favorite fantasy novels and movies, comics, etc. And so when he experiences a specifically difficult time in his life, there's a lot of change going on, his family is falling apart, he moves to a new town and he loses his best friends. He feels like everything around him is crumbling. And so he escapes into the world of his fantasy games where he thinks everything is better and it would be much better to be a hero of a game than it would be to be a normal 7th grader with chores and homework and all that stuff. But what Ben finds out is that being a hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. He meets this girl, Niara, who actually is from the fantasy world, and she comes and tells him that he is the destined person, the chosen one, who will save her kingdom from total destruction. And at first, Ben thinks that's the best thing ever, but he soon realizes that if he thought 7th grade was tough, being someone responsible for the future of the kingdom and for the lives of many others is a lot more responsibility than maybe he bargained for. So it's a funny adventure. It's illustrated. It's got great pictures and graphics and things, and it's just a really good time with cozy friendships and exciting action sequences and a lot of heart and humor.
All right, let's play a quick round of show and tell. Can you show us 5 things that helped to inspire your book?
That is a great question. I would have to say, of all the books I've written, and I've only written 5 books, and the other 4 were kind of a long time ago. This one is definitely the 5th one, Spellbinders, and this series is definitely the most like me as a person. It has a lot of the things that I love to do. The inspirations are things that are important to me as a person, and so it feels very close to my heart that way. I can show you a few things. I didn't have a lot, but I can show you some, I guess, artifacts of what inspired the book. First and most notably, I think, would be Dungeons and Dragons. This is the Dungeon Master's Guide, 5th edition. As you can see, we've got these great pictures and little stat blocks with information, little backstories, all that fun stuff. And I think the biggest single inspiration for me writing Spellbinders was that I wanted to write a middle grade book that had this kind of design element to it, and that but that was funny, and that it sort of blurred the lines between real life and fantasy. So you'll see in the book a lot Ben's own writings and his own game designs that are inspired by things like the Dungeon Master's Guide, but he's writing about things he sees in his own life as though they were in a fantasy world, and sometimes stuff in a fantasy world as though it's sort of seen from the normal everyday perspective of a kid who's in 7th grade. That was a big one, and I'm so lucky that they were able to reproduce that. So if you look in Spellbinders, there are really great graphics and illustrations that kind of capture that feeling. The other thing is video games. I play a lot of video games, not always fantasy, but they're a huge part of my life. My day job is a video game developer, and so I'm always thinking about games, and that comes through in a lot of the stories I write. They tend to have little elements that I take from my day job and my own enthusiasm about board games, video games, and other types of game design. I picked a couple different ones. Fantasy books, obviously. A lot of genre books, mostly fantasy. I love fantasy. Things like Lord of the Rings, Children of Blood and Bone, more recent, YA, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I mean, these are all great books from all different periods of literature, and there's always new great fantasy books coming out to inspire people who love fantasy and people who make fantasy. On a personal note, my family is a huge inspiration for me. My own children play a lot of games, and I would test games on them when they were young and sort of see if they liked them, and then we would play them as a family. And then I started doing that with my nieces and nephews. And I would do D&D groups with my nieces and nephews, and I would do board games at every family vacation. I kind of became known as the uncle who brought the board games. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not entirely sure. And if you look at the front of Spellbinders, it's actually dedicated to my own 2 children and all of their cousins, many of whom have grown up by now, but I played games with all of them at one point in our lives. Then the last thing, I think I've got it here. This is a dice that was given to me by my oldest child as a gift for Christmas, a Christmas gift several years ago, and it was chosen by them and bought by them at a fancy dice making craft shop forge. I'm not sure where it was, but it's just something I keep on me quite a bit whenever I'm going out or doing events or books or other stuff. It kind of gives me good luck. So predictably, a lot of stuff about games, but it really comes through in the book a lot. So it's very important to me.
What do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
What do I enjoy doing in my spare time? Well, with a full-time video game design and writing job, and then a book writing job on the side, or kind of tucked in the evenings and in the mornings and on weekends, there's not a lot of spare time. And most of that I like to spend doing stuff with my family. But the good thing is a lot of that family time involves playing games and reading books aloud and doing things like that. So I definitely love to play games, to try games, and to think about designing my own games. I do that on the side as well. I kind of do that as a creative exercise, is like kind of come up with a cool theme or an interesting game mechanic, and I kind of play around just designing a game, even if I never make it. But I love to read, obviously, and I love to watch movies, and I love to spend times with my friends talking about the stuff that I love, which is movies, games, and comic books and stuff like that. Yeah, so definitely there's kind of a theme running through this back and forth interview is it's games. So I like to play a lot of games.
If you had a special power, what would it be?
If I had a special power, I would choose the same thing I would have chosen 30 years ago, which is flight. I mean, you can't beat flight. It's kind of the best one, kind of always has been. I don't have to fight anybody. I don't need a power that I can use in some kind of power battle. And then it just has so many uses. I could get around cheaper, faster. I could go to places I can't reach unless I could fly. And I just think that there's something romantic, and I mean romantic not in like lovey-dovey romance, but kind of like in our minds that we imagine it to be something wonderful, is just the idea of flying up in the clouds and sort of seeing the world from up there. Definitely flying, and that might be a pretty obvious or everyone might say that, but it's always been the one I've wanted. So maybe someday.
If you could open up a portal to go anywhere in the universe, where would you go? Or would you rather create your own magical portal or world? That's a tough one.
Where would I go if I could create my own magical portal? So in Spellbinders, Ben finds a location called the House of Reflection, which is it's a kind of a crossroads where all different worlds around the universe kind of come together, and you can access them all through these different doorways and portals. If I had a portal like that, it would probably be to access my own imaginary worlds. I tend to have a handful, the same ones I return to when I daydream, and I have done that for most of my life. So there's like 4 or 5 places that I go to when I imagine myself going on an adventure, or when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, and I kind of, almost like putting on a pair of virtual reality goggles, I disappear into these things in my imagination and kind of just explore. And I don't know if that sounds strange or not, but it's definitely what I've always done. There's a science fiction that I have that I use. There are several different fantasy ones. And then there's some real world worlds that, more realistic worlds that I go to that I would love to kind of see made real. I think that would be really fun. And then just on a more practical side, I would love to have sort of a House of Reflection type thing where I could be like, boom, going to the pyramids of Giza. Boom, Great Wall of China. Boom, Tropical Island. Like, that would be amazing, and it would make seeing the world so much easier. So it's just kind of like a basic one.
So we heard that you have some serious gaming skills and you're a video game developer. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
I would love to talk about being a video game developer. It's something I feel very fortunate that I get to do. I feel very lucky. But you may have gotten some bad information when it comes to my skills as a gamer. I am notoriously terrible at games. It's something that I sort of admitted to myself and confessed to my friends and family when I was pretty young, actually, or at least a young adult. I'm really bad at games, and I often lose them. And so really early on, I just kind of got used to the idea that I'm going to lose a lot, and I found the joy in playing the games. That's actually what I enjoy doing the most, is I enjoy being the person who hosts game night, who teaches the game to people, and then who sort of acts as somebody who can answer questions. And I play the game, but I always kind of resign myself to losing very early, and I don't make it important to me. And that's, I don't know why that is. It's just a strange fluke, a weird trick of luck that I'm just not very good at games. And I remember, speaking of working as a video game developer, at my very first video game job, we would play multiplayer games as groups during lunch. We would go and kind of blow off steam by playing multiplayer games. And right away, my teammates figured out that I was really stinky at video games. And so they sort of used me as the decoy, and they used me as the person who they would put out where everyone else would attack them or strategize to defeat them, and then they would sneak around and do cool stuff to win the game for us. So I felt like, yay, I'm part of the winning team, but I also had the part I played was a little bit kind of, I don't know if I feel like being the one that they're all sacrificing to win. But again, I got used to it. So speaking about video game development, I've been doing that for about 18 years. And like I said, I feel very lucky that I get to do that. It was a dream of mine as a kid. My two big dreams were writing books and making video games. And I am not somebody who's very computer savvy. I am not great. I'm not a coder. I don't do a lot of that. But over the years, they've made it much easier for people who aren't people who can program or know computer science really well to be able to use tools to help build games. So they take part in a larger group of people who are all working different parts of making a game. I focus on writing stories for games, and I've written all kinds of games, ones for mobile platforms, for consoles like Xboxes and Sony PlayStations, and I've worked on games for PC, and I kind of gotten to work in a lot of different genres. So I get to work on like strategy, war games, I get to work on fun, cozy games, I get to work on little mobile games, fantasy games. Some of the games I've worked on the most have been big fantasy games that have, gotten right into the things that have led to books like Spellbinders. They have influenced me and inspired me to do that. So it's a really hard job. It takes a lot of time and a lot of emotional and intellectual energy. But at the same time, it's very fulfilling because I get to hear from people who play them. And I'm such a fan that I play them as well. So, yeah.
What advice would you give aspiring writers?
What advice would I give to aspiring writers? I would say the easiest answer to that is the answer that everybody's been giving forever. And I think it's especially true now that we have so many other distractions to keep us from reading, which is the single best thing you can do if you want to be a writer. Not only because it's good practice to read closely and to see how other people write and tell stories and what they do with the language itself as kind of a nuts and bolts thing. Like, you can use your language, whether it's English or another language, in so many different ways to have your voice be expressed through the page or the computer screen if you're writing, that it's just like endless possibilities. And reading other people and seeing what they do and how they think creatively and how they use the language is such good practice, and it inspires you to try different things. And I just think because there are so many voices on a bookshelf or online that you can read, and you can just see so many different points of view, that helps expand your mind beyond just being a writer, just as a person. It can inspire you to pursue new interests or things that you want to learn about, to see parts of the world you've never thought about before, or to talk to and be with people that maybe you don't bump into every day in your life. It just can be very inspiring in that way and can lead to making your own life much richer and fuller. So I would say reading, screens are great, video games and other games are great, but just like reading a book, there's just something you can't beat about it. Even if it's on a Kindle or something else, just reading it and being in your own head and just you and the words on the page, it's a very meaningful thing, I think, as a person. So I would say keep reading and always write. Make sure you do a little bit of writing. It doesn't have to be every single day for this amount of time. It can just be when you feel inspired to, compelled to write. It can be notes, it can be a screenplay, it can be a conversation, it can be just things you notice in the world and you write down and describe them. It really depends on who you are and what you're trying to, achieve with your writing, whether it's express emotions, whether it's tell a story, whether it's talk to somebody through a letter that you can't talk to out loud. There are a lot of things that you can do with writing. It's not just storytelling. So I would say you gotta read and you gotta write. Those are the things.
What is a recent middle grade read?
So what is one of my favorite recent middle grade books? So I set a goal for myself about a year ago. It was to catch up on all the middle grade reading I'd missed for a long time. I'm a big middle grade fan. And so I've been reading a lot, trying to catch up, trying to read what's new and current, and also stuff that I've been hearing about for a long time. And I read probably 4 or 5 books a week. And to some, that's a lot. And to other people, it's probably not so much. But for me, it's been really good just to kind of, get through a lot of great books. And so there are a large number of them that are excellent. So it might be difficult to name a few of them. But I did want to bring up this one I just finished. It's called Framed. It's part of the Framed series by James Ponti. James Ponti is probably most well known for City Spies, a series. I loved Framed because it's very grounded and very kind of down to earth. It's a mystery about a boy who is really good at noticing details and putting together all the facts to understand kind of what happens. And so he notices things that the police don't, or the FBI don't. And he actually gets recruited by the FBI to be sort of a junior agent. One of the things I loved most about this, and that I noticed from page 1, was that the main character is a citizen of Washington, D.C., which is where I live. And he goes to the school where my kids went to school. He lives in a neighborhood that's pretty much my neighborhood, and he hangs out in the places that we hang out. So it's cool to have an adventure that's so exciting that takes place in your own neighborhood and talks about places that you go and that your children go. So that was an extra added bonus. But Framed is really great, cleverly written, funny, and heartfelt. And I've only read the first one, but I'm excited to read the rest because I'm always excited for a good mystery.
Finish this sentence. Readers who like blank will enjoy Spellbinders.
So this is just my opinion, but I think readers who enjoy Christopher Healy's The Hero's Guide to Saving the Kingdom and that whole series will enjoy my book Spellbinders quite a bit. They both are very funny and kind of silly, and they play with very classic fantasy tropes that are the kinds of things you see in many different fantasy books over the years. Is it takes those ideas and kind of plays with them in fun ways, and it's not afraid to be a little silly, but it's all in good fun, and the readers have a good time. And our family we were huge fans of Christopher Healy's books, and they definitely were a little bit of an inspiration for why I decided to write a humorous fantasy, because I thought that those were really successful. So definitely, if you like humor with your epic action scenes and your magical creatures and all that stuff, I definitely would check out Christopher Healy's books. And there are plenty of others that I could also probably talk about, but I don't want to take too long with the answer.
Would you be willing to walk us and our viewers through a writing or world building or character developing activity?
Sure, I'd be glad to talk about some of the stuff I do when I'm world building. I think the writing exercise I use the most, or at least the one that I think about the most because it's lodged in my memory, is actually one I learned way back when I was in elementary school, which is many years ago now. But at the time, the teacher was introducing us to this novel called The Green Book, which is a very thin science fiction novel for kids. It's by Jill Patton Walsh, and they still make it. You can get it on Amazon or wherever. And it is the story of a group of settlers who have to leave Earth and settle a planet in a faraway solar system. They don't know what they're going to find, and there's limited space on the spacecraft, so everybody has to pack very light. And as an exercise, our teacher had us, as a writing exercise and just a thought exercise, she had us make a list of what we would pack, knowing that we could only pack 10 items or so. So we would go through and think about, okay, well, what things define me as a person? And you can do this for characters, fictional characters. What things do I want to bring as a character? What's important to me? Because those few things will definitely show what I value as a person, and what I want to take with me to remember Earth. But then also think about, well, where are they going? It could be a fantasy kingdom. It could be another planet. It could be the real world. But what we're bringing and packing will tell us a lot about what we expect to find there, or if we don't know what to expect and we need to kind of pack for any situation. So this exercise can be used in a variety of different ways, but I always find it leads me to ask interesting questions about both the character I'm writing about, but also the place that I'm going, the world that the character will end up in, and kind of what adventures await them, and how they might deal with them. So that's a really good one. Thank you so much for having me on today. I loved answering your questions, and I love to talk about Spellbinders, the Not So Chosen one. It's the first in the Spellbinders series, so there's more to come. Thanks again, and take care.